Thank you so much for coming over at TaiwaneseAmerican.org. Can you sort of tell me a little bit about yourself? What is your story?
I was born in Los Angeles, actually. I've never been there. And right after I got my passport, we were like, all right, time to go home. So then we went back to Taiwan when I was a couple months old, and I was here until I was 16, and I went to boarding school in New York. And then I kept staying there until Corona happened.
How did you find yourself in comedy and as an actor, actress, all of the above?
I was a communications major because I wanted to do international relations. I was interested in politics and journalism, but unfortunately my writing's shit because, my English just, it is from Taiwan. But I am really interested in it, especially in Taiwanese politics. I think growing up in this Taiwanese environment, it is very political. I mean, it was such a shock for me to find out that people don't vote in America, because it's like, how can you not vote in Taiwan? How can you not care about politics in Taiwan? Like, so it's natural for someone who grew up here to have that sensibility. However, in grad school, I was denied to all of my fancy schmancy schools for international relations. And the one school I did get in was my safety school, which my mother forced me, obviously. She wanted me to go into educational theater. So I got into that school, and everybody was extraordinarily qualified, and I was extraordinarily unqualified. And so I had to go train as an actor to just even know what they were talking about. So I went to audition for conservatories in New York City, and that was my first step into getting into acting.
How did you also find yourself in stand-up comedy? Because I know you do a lot of that.
So 5 years into my acting career, I was very exhausted. Like, I worked myself so hard. I remember like one day I just, lack of sleep and just working so much and resting so little. I remember finishing my restaurant job, going to rehearsal. At the end of the night, I blacked out. And that was the scariest thing to me. After this many years of it, I was like, I did all I could. I really did. If the stars don't line up by this point, like, that's that. And so that Thanksgiving, I was just like, all right, I think it's time to go home. I came across this video of my friend, and I knew him as an actor in New York City. And I saw this video on his website of him doing stand-up at Gotham Comedy Club. And I called him. I was like, oh my God, Brian, I had no idea you do this. This is so incredible. And he was like, yeah, it was just like a one-time thing. I took a class and it was fun, and that's that. And I'm like, I want to take this class. This is so fun. So I took a stand-up class in the showcases at Gotham Comedy Club, and I did it. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Maybe I'll give it a second try. Maybe I'll do the class one more time. And when I did the class one more time, the Metropolitan Opera in Lincoln Center was doing this show called Le Perche de Peur. It's French. And they were looking for dancers and actors. And I was like, well, it doesn't hurt. So surprisingly, the things that were required of us weren't super technical. It was more so a very experimental method of moving that I've actually been training under that for 4 years at the time. So it came to me very handy, and I got in. It paid a lot, so obviously I was going to do it. So I stayed, and then I had other jobs that came in, and like things got easier once I started to do comedy. And I think it has, I'm not entirely sure, but if you think of like the voodoo way of thinking things, it's like, you're not grabbing onto one thing and choking it so hard. You're sort of like giving it space to breathe a little bit. But I mean, I still love acting the most. It's what I am the best at. I've been working as an actor for 10 years. So comedy is still, to a certain extent, very new to me. I mean, I've only been doing it for 4 years. 5 years.
Before this conversation, we were talking a little bit about like how like in Taiwan you have to like portray this certain character, versus in America you have to like try not to be the sex character. So can you talk a little bit more about like that difference and how you sort of tailor your content?
In America, I think there's a higher tendency for Asian women to be seen as sex symbols. So I have to be careful with how I dress. Like, let's say I just wear like a nice top with a leather skirt. I think that is like an okay going out with friends, not trying to look uberly sexy, just, whatever. But then like once you bring it on stage, it has a very different connotation. And I'm not saying women should wear what or what not. Stand-up is like a battleground. You're doing everything you can to win people over as soon as possible. You're trying to make people like you and all of the people in the audience. So far, what it's been like, it seems like it is easier to get everybody to like you when you're less of a sex object.
Okay.
This could change down the line, but from my very, very little experience of doing it, that seems to be the case. Or it might be a personal thing. I just feel more comfortable when people don't find me to be pretty. I feel like I can express more of myself without my outwards being a distraction. Maybe that's like the Taiwanese American childhood upbringing that shapes your identity. Like if you look pretty at all, if your boobs are slightly bigger, or I don't know, or if you wear a little bit of makeup, it's like extraordinarily noticed. You know what I'm saying? I do know that the opposite is the situation in Taiwan. They like to see like a pretty thing on stage and almost feel like, oh, I want to be like that person. It's a very different thing than in America.
How about in terms of content?
It's an interesting thing because in America, I would have to refer to myself as Asian because, like, you have to remember, you need 4 to 6 laughs per minute on stage. So there's really no time to be like, Taiwan is this island right next to China. Once upon a time, they identified as the real China. There's no time for history. So there's almost no time to like educate people about what it means to be from Taiwan for unfortunately. I mean, I try really hard to write stuff that helps it, but just because of the lack of understanding of different Asian cultures, it becomes a very big challenge. So for example, I have this joke. My agent called me. He's like, "Are you Chinese?" And then during that audition, so then they confirmed me. They were like, "Yeah, congratulations, you are Chinese." And then 3 hours later, they were like, "Oh, but if you've been to China in the last 3 months, do not show up to this audition." And that was a really strange question for me because back in this January, I did come home to Taiwan to vote and to get the virus. But see, in my opinion, I didn't go to China, but in China's opinion, I went to China, which is impossible because I went home to vote. So every time I do that joke in the States, it flies over people's heads. But when I bring it to Taiwan, it becomes a joke.
Do you have like maybe like another example where it's like the reverse, where like you can only use it in America, but you would not be able to use it in Taiwan?
Anything racism related, anything sexism related, people don't understand it in Taiwan. I mean, they might cerebrally understand it, but they don't because we don't talk about sexism and we've never experienced racism. I mean, there is more foreigners here, but even then, we don't understand racial politics the way Black Lives Matters happened. We don't understand Americans' history of it and what it's like in an international understanding, just because we don't have a lot of foreigners back in the days. And even now, we're not really talking about it, or we don't consider it something very, very important. Same with sexism. It's very different. We did not go through Me Too. We did not go through like the bra burning era. And so these two things are foreign concepts. Even if we experience it on a daily basis, we're just like, well, that's how life is. That's how society functions. This is what it is.
Thank you so much, Esther.